Hi, welcome to Movies Moment. Today we are going to explain a movie called Freddy's Fridays. Spoilers ahead. Subscribe if you like this and catch us on the next one. Take care.
In the middle of the streets of London, a couple take advantage of the night to have their romantic moment. However, the man, called Todd, prefers to enjoy the rest of the evening in a more discreet place and invites the young woman, Anastasia, to his home. But when they get there, what she finds is a sinister basement, where in one of the rooms there is a table with candles and strange objects. At first, the young woman doesn't care, but when she looks closely, she finds a small diary with a living eye on the cover. Anastasia thinks it's just an ordinary book, but Todd asks her to read it aloud. Although confused by this request, she agrees, but the text is in Latin and she doesn't understand what the words mean. Suddenly, the guy gets angry and orders her to read the text of the book as soon as possible. Anastasia finds this strange, but nevertheless reads the whole passage. After that, the young woman wants to go back to enjoying the evening, but Todd walks away and, soon afterwards, a strong wind blows out the candles in the room. Anastasia is frightened and things only get worse when, at the end of the corridor, four mysterious beings appear, with faces that look like masks of animatronic dolls. The group approaches, armed with sharp objects, and Anastasia asks Todd for help. However, he only apologizes, pushes her towards the masked men and the leader, called Freddy, strikes her in the neck with a scythe. He then pulls her to the other side of the room and lands more blows on her back. Finally, his colleagues lift her up by her hair and hand an axe to Freddy who, without hesitation, delivers a fatal blow, separating her head from her body. After the attack, Todd stands in front of the creatures and tells them that there are now only 2 more victims left. The next day, a young woman called Connie is crying in a room while giving evidence to Detective Lila. She talks about her friend, Anastasia, who has been missing since last Friday and that she used to work for an agency called Rose. Although shaken, the young woman asks for her friend to be found, as it is the closest thing she has to a family. Without suspecting Anastasia's tragic fate, Detective Lila promises that she will solve the case, starting by investigating the agency where she worked. Seconds later, her boss, Inspector Banks, goes to talk to the detective, who says she has new information about the case she is investigating. According to the evidence, Anastasia was the 6th girl to disappear in a few weeks and that there must be a pattern leading to the person responsible for the crimes. The inspector, however, believes that this is just another case of women being victims of chemical abuse and that the detective shouldn't get her hopes up. Even so, Lila is willing to investigate this case to the end. Hours later, she goes to the address indicated by Connie and, as she walks down the street, a woman pulls her by the arm. The woman, called Patricia, is the owner of the girls' agency and she takes Lila to a less busy street to talk. Patricia says that many of her employees need the money to survive, so she worries about their safety. Because of this, she keeps a list of her clients, including Anastasia's, with her latest being a stockbroker called Todd Fisher. With this information, Lila can continue with the investigation, but before she goes, she shows Patricia the photos of the other 5 victims. Unfortunately, they were all found lifeless and the detective fears that the same thing has happened to Anastasia. However, Patricia doesn't recognize them, but is upset by the state in which they were found in the photos. She assures the detective that if Todd contacts her again, she will let her know and asks her to find the person responsible for the disappearances as soon as possible. Later, Lila returns home, where her boyfriend, John, is worried about how the investigation is going. He believes that the detective is obsessed with this case because her sister, Sarah, was also a victim and captured when she was still a child. The detective says she needs to spend some time alone and, when John leaves, her friend and roommate, Jess, shows up to comfort her. Lila takes advantage of her knowledge of social networks and asks Jess to find information about Todd. The two join forces in the search for the guy, who is at his house, getting ready for another date. Todd, however, no longer wishes to do this, but soon afterwards, Freddy and his companions appear in the room, demanding that he fulfill the agreement. With no alternative, Todd calls another girls' agency, asking for a woman to spend another Friday night with. Meanwhile, Lila and Jess discover that Todd has gone from a failed stockbroker to one of London's most successful investors in the space of a few months. They both find this suspicious and, thanks to Jess's contacts, Lila discovers that he will take a girl to an exclusive club, Clara Belle's. Best of all, Jess has an entry card for the club and Lila intends to use it to get in. So, to keep her identity a secret, Lila asks Jess to help her dress as elegantly as possible and goes to Clara Belle's. There, she asks for a drink at the bar and 2 men try to intimidate her, but the detective dismisses them both and continues her search for Todd. Despite being uncomfortable in this environment, Lila finally finds him at a table with his new girl. The two leave the club and go to the parking lot, with the detective following them discreetly. Even so, Todd realizes that there is something strange and goes to investigate the surroundings to see if anyone is watching them. At that moment, Lila manages to hide, and so the couple head for the same basement where Anastasia was eliminated. After entering, Lila tries to do the same, but the door is locked and she leaves in search of another entrance. In the meantime, Todd takes the young girl down to the basement, where she meets one of Freddy's helpers, but he lies motionless on the floor, like a doll. Todd disguises it by saying it's just a family heirloom and invites her into the other room, where the table with candles and the macabre book are. Just as he did with Anastasia, he asks the woman to read the text in Latin, and, when she refuses, Todd insults her and forces her to do as he asks. The young girl gets nervous and reads the whole passage in the book, which seems to be a magical ritual to bring Freddy and his henchmen to life. The creatures awaken and immediately advance towards the girl with their sharp weapons. The young woman then begs for mercy, as she needs to look after her young daughter. However, the monsters don't care, and without her realizing it, Freddy appears from behind and slashes her back with his scythe. The young woman falls to the ground, seriously wounded, and Freddy picks up the axe and uses it to hit the girl, who has her head and limbs severed from her body. After eliminating her in an insane manner, Freddy advances towards Todd, who reminds him that there is only one more victim to go before he is free of the deal. After that, Todd heads for the basement exit, without realizing that Lila was hiding under the stairs. After he leaves, the detective heads towards the crime scene with her flashlight, but the girl's body has been taken away by Freddy, leaving only a huge pool of blood on the floor. The detective continues to investigate and, on finding the macabre book on the table, she decides to take it as evidence and leaves the basement. Hours later, Lila returns home to find John scolding her for exposing herself to risk in such a way. However, the detective is more concerned with solving the case and shows him the book she found at the crime scene, with its cover made of human skin. She believes that this book is the tool used for a supernatural ritual and that she needs to discover the meaning of its Latin texts. John advises that the best thing to do is to call the police to arrest the suspect, but Lila knows that she doesn't yet have enough evidence to incriminate him. Besides, since Todd is a man with a lot of resources, he could be cleared with the help of a good lawyer and the whole investigation would be pointless. So Lila suggests that the best idea is to arrest him in the act, at a new meeting with his possible next victim. To put this idea into practice, the detective keeps trying to read the book and finds a passage that talks about a macabre ritual. According to the text, whoever wants to have their greatest desires fulfilled must make 8 sacrifices to Frederic, the entity known as Freddy. She doesn't know who or what this Frederic might be, and, to make matters worse, John tries to help and ends up reading aloud the passage that causes the creatures to awaken. Fortunately, nothing happens and the man says he has to leave because he still has work to do at home. He says goodbye to Lila, who is going to rest after a long night. Later, while John was working on his paintings, the lights in the house suddenly went out. He tries to turn them back on, but everything goes dark and he is forced to use the flashlight on his cell phone to see what might have happened. He searches around the house and, secretly, Freddy and his cronies sneak through the rooms. Finally, John believes it was a blackout and returns to his desk, only to be hit by Freddy, right above his skull. Even with this fatal blow, John tries to escape, but one of Freddy's henchmen appears behind him and eliminates him by cutting his throat. Another day passes and Lila goes to her inspector to pass on the information she has found, including that of her main suspect, Todd Fisher. However, none of it is enough to convince him. The detective soon realizes that she needs more evidence to bring the case to justice, but the situation is about to take a turn for the worse when her cell phone rings. When she answers it, Lila becomes extremely upset and leaves. Unfortunately, she rushes to John's house and discovers that her boyfriend has been disposed of in a terrible way, with his head having been removed. She doesn't even manage to enter the crime scene and just leaves, extremely shaken that her boyfriend was a likely victim of the animatronics case she is investigating. She then goes home and, in the midst of all the sadness, falls asleep on the sofa. In her dreams, Lila sees herself returning to the basement where the crimes took place, but she seems to be in a trance, walking around the place without being able to control her actions. Lila wanders around until she finds Freddy, along with the animatronics that eliminated John. Besides them, in an opening in the wall, her boyfriend also appears and goes to meet her. The detective is happy to see John and tries to kiss him, but just then he pulls out a huge knife and hits Lila with it. This attack causes Lila to wake up, lying on Jess's lap, who tries to calm her colleague down. Jess insists that she try to get some rest, but Lila doesn't intend to stop until the culprit pays for his crimes. She asks Jess for help and the two of them meet in the living room to recap everything they've discovered so far. Before they begin, Lila has the impression of seeing one of Freddy's servants on the wall, but the image soon disappears. The detective pulls herself together and the two talk about Freddy, who, according to the book, is an ancient macabre entity. When summoned, he makes wishes come true, as long as 8 lives are given to him. Otherwise, Freddy himself will remove the head of the person who summoned him. In addition, the sacrifices must be delivered by the 5th day, which would be Thursday, but according to the pattern of eliminations, Lila believes it to be every Friday. The two continue to reason together, and again, the apparitions of Freddy and his cronies continue to torment Lila, but soon after, they disappear. With everything exposed, Jess doesn't believe that something supernatural caused the perishments, but Lila insists that somehow the book was responsible. She points to the passage written in Latin which, according to Jess's translation, is a call for Freddy's soul to come to this world. Jess remains skeptical about the matter, but Lila is willing to do anything to bring the truth to light. To do so, she decides to do the unthinkable, and, when the fateful Friday arrives, she dresses up as a girl from the agency in an attempt to lure Todd into her trap. Hours later, Lila leaves Jess at the apartment and heads to the Clara Bells Club. When she gets there, she finds Todd with another young woman, but the guy says he's going to the bathroom and asks the girl to wait at the table. Lila takes this opportunity and goes to talk to the woman, warning her that the guy she's seeing is a criminal. The young woman is frightened and afraid of being seen by him, but the detective gives her all the instructions she needs to leave without being noticed. Minutes later, Todd returns to the bar, but realizes that his girl has gone. Instead, he finds Lila, who easily lures him into taking her to his basement and then unmasking him. The couple then leave the bar, while Jess continues to wait for Lila in her apartment. However, the lights start to go out mysteriously, and, when the young woman looks in the mirror, she finds Freddy and his companions surrounding the whole place. The girl gets scared and tries to run away, but she only sees the entities through the mirror and believes it's all a figment of her imagination. She tries to catch her breath by leaning on a table, and when she looks in the mirror again, she realizes that the individuals have disappeared. The lights, however, continue to flash, and Jess tries to convince herself that none of it is real. To her misfortune, the creatures return to her room, and one of them, dressed in a cloth mask, takes a pitchfork and strikes the girl's body with it. Not satisfied, he lifts Jess up with the weapon as blood begins to pour from her mouth. Finally, he drops her to the ground and lets his leader, Freddy, finish the job. The entity picks up his hammer and, with a sharp blow, hits Jess in the jaw, who becomes another of Freddy's victims. Tragically, Lila doesn't know what happened to her best friend and continues her plan, following Todd down to the basement. The guy continues with his conquest strategy, until he finally asks the woman to do some reading. He then goes to the table in search of the cursed book, but doesn't find it there. Desperate, Todd looks everywhere for the book, but there is no sign of it. Lila ironically questions him about this, but Todd soon pulls himself together as he says that he has memorized the passage used for the ritual and asks the woman to repeat it aloud. Lila refuses and reveals that she knows the whole truth about Todd and the crimes he committed with the other women. He tries to justify himself, saying that he only lured the victims, but that the real criminal was always Freddy. Even so, Lila threatens him, warning that he will soon be arrested for his actions. On hearing this, Todd tries to attack the policewoman and forces her to recite the passage from the book. However, Friday is coming to an end, and, as he hasn't kept his bargain, Freddy and his animatronics appear in the basement to collect their debt. Todd begs to be spared, as he has handed over 7 volunteer souls to Freddy, but the entity doesn't care. He slowly advances towards Todd, but then one of his cronies runs up with a knife and hits him right in the middle of the neck. Todd falls and tries to stop the bleeding, but he knows it's too late. Freddy approaches him, this time with no weapon in hand, and punches Todd several times, opening up the wound in his neck even more. Todd has been eliminated, without fulfilling his desire for more fame and fortune, and his soul is condemned forever. Lila takes advantage of the monsters being distracted and flees the basement as quickly as possible. Shortly afterwards, she returns to her apartment to warn Jess, but she is faced with yet another tragedy when she sees her lying lifeless on the floor. With nothing left to lose, Lila gathers what little motivation she has left and tries to find a way to destroy Freddy once and for all. When she checks the book, she realizes that Jess has already translated some passages, one of which says that Freddy can only be eliminated with his own weapon. Lila then sets out to confront the entity, until she comes across the inspector, who has gone to investigate the crime that took place in her apartment. The man almost shoots her and demands to know what happened. The detective summarizes the whole story for her boss, saying that the person responsible for the eliminations is an entity called Freddy. He always attacks his victims on Fridays and demands 8 souls from those who summon him, otherwise the person will be eliminated, just like Todd. Lila finishes by saying that Freddy is now after her, because as she recited the incantation, she owes him 8 souls, with John and Jess being 2 of them. After everything that has been said, the inspector believes that Lila has gone mad with this case, but he still decides to go with her to the end to uncover the truth. The pair then head down to the basement, armed with baseball bats and golf clubs, and decide to repeat the ritual. But this time, Lila will offer herself as a sacrifice to lure Freddy away. When they get there, the 2 perform the ritual and, at the same moment, the lights go out and Freddy, along with his animatronics, surround them in the basement. Lila and the inspector start fighting and manage to take down one of Freddy's henchmen, but the other, with the bag over his head, appears and attacks the inspector with the pitchfork. Lila sets out to help her boss and manages to take the enemy's head off with a strong blow from her club. Then the 3rd henchman, wearing a clown mask, enters the fray and uses his sharp claws to slash Lila's back and pull her across the room. Even though she's wounded, the detective quickly strikes back and uses the entity's own claws against him, eliminating him for good. Finally, Freddy appears and Lila throws the pitchfork at him, but the entity holds it in the air without difficulty. Freddy then throws a machete at the detective, but she catches the weapon in midair and throws it at the villain, who falls to the ground, unconscious. The detective rushes to help the inspector, just as one of the henchmen gets up, but Lila quickly hits him with his own scythe, putting an end to the last member of the evil group. Freddy's nightmare is finally over and, 2 weeks later, Lila and the inspector are reunited in front of the building. The 2 of them are unable to exchange words about what happened and just watch, as they try to process all the trauma that this strange case has put them through. However, the case is still unsolved, because in the middle of Todd's basement, Freddy raises his head and removes the machete from his body, proving that his evil mission still continues.